Hi, I'm Michael Murphy. I'm a chartered financial analyst and I'm the editor of New World Investor. And I've written a book called Survive the Great Inflation that's be coming out on October 12th. And I wanted to talk to you about the first part of that book in this video, the part that explains why we are in for a great deflation. In the next video, I'm going to talk about what the Fed is going to try to do about it. And in the third video, I'm going to talk about what you need to do to protect yourself. The subtitle of this book is How to Protect Yourself, Your Family, and Your Future from the Worst Fed Regime Ever. Now, I don't have a lot of bad things to say about Bernanke as a person, but I think he's the wrong person in the wrong place at the wrong time. And here's why. We do face strong deflationary forces in this economy, there's no doubt. But the one that he sees, in fact the one that everybody sees, is just the credit deflation. There's an aspect to that he hasn't thought of, and there's two other very strong deflationary forces that he really can't do anything about. The trouble is, he's going to try. He's going to spend money, and he is eventually going to cause the dollar to fall very sharply and set off a great inflation, and maybe a hyperinflation. So what are those deflationary forces? Well, we can all see the credit collapse. We see people deleveraging, we see businesses deleveraging, we see foreclosures. It's tough out there, and Bernanke is using the typical monetary tools, and President Obama is using the typical fiscal tools to try to fight it. But the problem is, you have a generation that's retiring, the baby boomer generation, that historically, that generation has been an easy user of credit. They have believed in credit, and the generation that's coming into power, the millennials, the Generation X people, really don't like credit that much. They're saddled with a lot of student loans that the baby boomers never had to deal with, and they're more interested in trying to get out of debt than get further into debt. So while Bernanke is trying to push an expansion of credit onto people, he's having a difficult time getting the banks to loan through the money and find people who want to borrow the money, because there's an actual cultural change going on that he really can't do anything about. The second big deflationary force is the retirement of the baby boomers. Now, this one is so obvious, it's hard for me to understand why the government doesn't realize what a deflationary force it is. Harry Dent has done some great work on what happens as generations age, and of course their maximum spending peaks around age 48, and then it starts to slow down as the kids get into college, and then people have what they need in terms of houses and cars and toys and whatever. They may even be trading their house down. They may be buying a car thinking they'll be keeping it for 20 years instead of every 3 or 4 years. They get a little more interested in traveling, but they get a lot less interested in spending money on gimmicks. And there's a natural deflationary impact of people's spending curve as they age. The problem is that the baby boomers, who are moving like the traditional pig through the python, are so large as a component of our economy that as they retire, they're a very strong, noticeable deflationary force. The next generation is about half the size of the baby boomer generation. And even though they'll follow the standard spending curve, and they will, of course, buy houses, and they will educate their kids, and they'll buy cars, there just aren't enough of them to make up the difference for the economy. And there's nothing that the Bernanke Fed can do about that. Then the third big impact, which I don't think anybody realizes except some of my subscribers, is technology. Technology reduces prices every year. Gordon Moore is one of the founders of Intel, propounded Moore's Law about 40 years ago. And that was that essentially the cost of doing anything with a semiconductor falls 50% every couple of years. And that's a very rapid drop in costs, and it's one of the reasons we've had this vast expansion in productivity that we've seen. It's going to continue, and it comes out in a higher standard of living simply because costs keep falling. Now, what are falling costs? Falling costs are deflation. And it's pointless for the federal government, or particularly the Federal Reserve, to worry about it or to try to fight it. It is inevitable. Technology has now spread around the globe between the internet, the fiber optic and wireless networks, and the available computers and now smartphones that can access the internet at a very low price. We're seeing a tremendous explosion in the number of people who can take advantage of technology. At the same time, we're seeing declining costs for all of these technologies, laptops, netbooks, smartphones. And this is not going to stop. It's going to continue. And again, it's something that Chairman Bernanke or the Treasury Department or the Congress just can do nothing about, except, of course, adapt to it. Now, why is this such a big problem for everybody? It's a big problem because Chairman Bernanke was basically brought up to fight deflation. He wrote his thesis on the Great Depression. He taught the Great Depression at Princeton. He is an expert on the Great Depression, and he has said many times there's not going to be a big deflation on his watch. He is determined to not let it happen. So you may think that with these forces, we need a Fed chairman who would be like the willow tree and bend in the breeze and survive. But instead, we've got the Fed chairman who's like the oak. He's going to stand there and fight and fight and fight until the day the whole tree comes down. And that's the great danger that I see coming. We've already seen a huge expansion in the Fed's balance sheet, a huge expansion in the money supply. It's true, it has not caused inflation yet because the way it has been pushed into the economy is through the banks. And the banks are sitting on that money and trying to rebuild their balance sheets from their bad real estate investments. But that money will get into the economy, and it can happen pretty quickly once it begins. I know Chairman Bernanke thinks he can undo what he's done and pull that money back out. But you know what? It's like Keynesianism. Keynes had a great idea. When the economy is soft, run a federal fiscal deficit and the economy will get better. And then when the economy improves, run a surplus and pay off the debt. But what happens in real life? No problem running the deficits. Makes everybody feel better to give the taxpayers more money. But then you get in the good economy and try and run the surplus, forget about it. You can't get those bills through Congress. Nobody wants to cut the spending. People will get voted out of office. And so it never happens. And so our debt just builds and builds. Bernanke's going to have the same problem. He's put so much money into the economy. To turn around and take it back out quickly would almost be politically impossible, even if it was the right thing to do. And as I think I've shown you, it was the wrong thing to do to put it into the economy as much as he has. And I think it would be the right thing to take it back out slowly, but he still risks very high double-digit inflation, or even worse, hyperinflation. In the next video in this series, I'm going to talk to you about how exactly the Fed does this, how you can keep track of it, and why we think you need personally to protect yourself against the inflation that's coming.